I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Una Ni Dhonghaile, Editor on Kenneth Branagh's coming-of-age fable, Belfast. Una, first of all, I'm curious. This movie is really personal because you're one of the artists bringing Kenneth Branagh's childhood to life on screen. So when it came time to piece the film together, what was the brief from Kenneth?
So in actual fact, the brief from Kenneth, actually, it was all in his script. We had finished working together on Death on the Nile. So actually, Belfast is the third feature film for myself and Ken to work on together, me as the editor, in a 2-year period. So we did 3 films in a 2-year period: the Passion Project, All Is True, the Passion Project Belfast, and Death on the Nile. So actually, he didn't have to brief me too much because I actually knew him. I had the pleasure of working with him so intimately through All Is True and Death on the Nile. And when I went back to Death on the Nile, we went into lockdown in March 2020. I returned to Dublin to finish Death on the Nile remotely. And then in June, I returned to London because I have a studio here in Dublin, and I returned to London to do the final lock-in with Ken. And that's when he produced this beautiful script of Belfast and said he had been writing it since the lockdown in March. And he just sort of very modestly gave it to me and said, I'd love you to edit it if it's your cup of tea. And I took it home that night. I read it and I was just like, oh my God. So I was writing back to him saying, it is definitely my cup of tea. I would be just privileged to join you on this journey. So I think he didn't have to brief me too much because I understood it from the page. It was the most beautiful love letter to the city of Belfast, to his beautiful family and his neighbours of all persuasions, Catholics and Protestants. My family, I'm from Dublin, but my father and my uncles and my grandparents, they're all from Omagh in County Tyrone. And where Ken's family would have been Protestant working class background, I would have a Catholic working class background. So I just recognized these people, the vernacular, the way they spoke, the way that they could quote a poem or sing a song to emphasize a point. That's like my family. So I really recognized my father and my uncles in Pops and in Pa. And I just thought, what a wonderful, love letter to his family in this city. And I just knew I would want to be part of it. In actual fact, Rob, for years, I've actually been saying, because my father always spoke to me as we were growing up about the great friendships between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland in the years prior to the Troubles. And I've actually always been sort of saying privately, and never to Ken actually, but just privately to friends and family, I wish we could make a film that actually celebrated those type of things. So when I read Ken's script, I just thought, well, he's done it. He's just done something that really chimed with me and I recognized.
So you've been living and breathing Ken Branagh for a little while now in terms of your work. You know what? I really think that has made some impact in your ability to really. There's just something about this film. It just transcends a semi-autobiographical story. It's very emotional, and it resonates. People all over the world are into this movie. No matter where you're from, you can take something out of this. It's a universal story about family wanting a better life. And it's also a way for you to remind yourself about your own family. And that's certainly what I took out of the film. I wonder then, given that that's what I felt, and you've touched on this already, but when all is said and done and you've seen the film, what did you take away from it personally?
Well, on a very personal level, I just love the fact that he was giving voice to the humanity of the people of Northern Ireland. Belfast, as a word, for me growing up as a teenager, it was infused with the violence of the Troubles. And actually, I think he sort of reclaimed that name. And I'm really proud of Ken that he's kept Belfast, because when I first read it, I did wonder, would we be able to keep Belfast as the name, or would there be sort of a pressure to say, if people are going to the cinema, would they want to see, West Side Story or Belfast? Would Belfast be a word that could be quite challenging? And actually, I love the fact that he kept Belfast, because it's a great city, and it's sort of reclaiming that word for the people of Belfast, of all persuasions, as I said, not just Catholic and Protestant. There's many more religions than that up there. And I think, I think for me, it was just the celebration of humanity. And in our world, when we have all been going through this pandemic, a little bit of goodness, of just sort of saying, treat others as you wish to be treated, without it sounding religious, but that we're all on this world for such a short amount of time. And
Yeah.
if we can be good to each other, we can all actually benefit from a quality of life and a compassion and a humanity that is universal, regardless of the color of our skin or our creed or whatever. So I think that's what I took. Even when I read it, I know the first night when I wrote to Ken, I did say to him, you know, if a family who are, just as you said, Rob, a family who could be escaping conflict, whether it's, you know, Syria or the Jewish people of old, you know, as a world, we can actually recognize this, whether you've left a war-torn country or whether you've actually left for economic reasons. But when family, and that's why I think Ma is sort of important, because she doesn't want to leave. And it was very important for us, say, as the editor working with Ken, to just keep watching the shape of the film and to make sure that we allowed Ma have a moment like that little sequence of Days Like These, where you could actually see the beauty of Belfast in 1969, where you could sit in, you know, the park with your children and they're all jumping and the family gather. And it was really important actually to give voice to that as well, because it wasn't just violence. If it was violence, an audience might get frustrated with Ma and think, why on earth isn't she leaving? So it was really important, say, from a storytelling point of view, that we could show that complexity of this is their home. And barricades are built, but children still go to school. And, you know, that happens the world over. And like ice cream vans can sound while there's a riot happening over there. And we had to build that into our sound design as well, just to give this textured approach to storytelling.
You know what? You know, honestly, I've thought about this movie so much. Obviously, this is my job, but I never thought about how the word Belfast has connotations. It certainly does. You think about In the Name of the Father and Sunday Bloody Sunday and that kind of aesthetic, not this. And to be able to just kind of turn it on its head and make it more of a fable and something that you can kind of enjoy and love really is such a testament to all of you for making it in the way you did. You know, that brings me to this. I think there's some sequences in this film that I really loved the way that you cut them together. I know the editor is supposed to be invisible, but without your skill, a movie can honestly fall apart. And I really mean that. For example, you know, a lot of people want to talk about the everlasting love, the wake after the funeral, but that was sublime in the way that I felt like I was there. And I could feel what was going on between Caitríona Balfe's eyes and Jamie Dornan's eyes. Can you talk us through what you were trying to achieve there and particularly the way that you cut that so intentionally?
Yeah, and I would say, as any editor, I'm sure before me and after me would say, you know, I am blessed that we were working with a most beautiful script from Ken and insightful directing, but our cast as well were exquisite. So, I mean, a big shout out to Caitríona and Jamie and Ciarán Hinds, Judy Dench, and beautiful little Jude Hill. Yeah. So, I mean, that sequence, one could begin editing that sequence and sort of get caught up in all the footage, because Ken actually shot a lot of footage for that sequence. It's quite funny in the film that sometimes we were more restrained in footage. For the riots or this dance sequence, we had 2 cameras going at all times. So actually for me, the challenge as the editor was to keep an eye on the subtext, because the bottom line of that scene, it has the bells and whistles of, you know, the trumpet playing and those little fast edits, but it was to tell the story that actually Pa and Ma are actually going to come together, and after an hour and a half of tension and stress of, are we going to leave Belfast? The tax man is looking for more money, that actually their love will actually shine through. So when I was cutting it, I was really watching Caitríona's performance as well as Jamie, and Caitríona was exquisite in every take. She always did this little look where she tilted her head when she was looking at Pa, and that's that moment of she's dancing with Jude first, Buddy, and then he goes over to Granny. And again, as an editor, you know, you have to plot that little profile shot of Judi Dench, because it is the wake of Pops. I hope this is not a spoiler. I hope anyone has seen the film before they listen to it.
Go away and come back.
But it was really important that, you know, Pops had died. Yeah. We were going to go to, you know, the family leaving, so we needed this release in the film, this emotional release. And there were a few other moments like this of sort of magic realism, a little bit, where, you know, Jamie could just sing. But it was really important to actually have the celebration of those sort of virtuoso of shots, but also grounding the subtext of Mom Pa. and Granny, actually. And when little Jude goes over to Granny, you know, and he puts his hand on her shoulder, just finding those little moments, which was actually at the end of a take. And Jude actually went up to Judi Dench in that sort of little manner. And it was just like finding those little moments and thinking, okay, let's use that and let's build this sequence to allow the audience to just relax and let go and celebrate the life of Pops before going to the next level, which was the departure from Belfast.
Yeah. It just, yeah, I really have no words for it. I really, really, really enjoyed it. And a lot of it had to do with you. The other one that I wanted to raise with you was where towards the end of the film, before the wake, obviously, when Buddy comes to the pub to tell Pa that his father has passed away, it's Jamie Dornan's highlight for me. It's his best scene. He doesn't say anything. It's non-verbal.
Yeah.
And Buddy, Jude as Buddy, I mean, God, for such a young kid, he is extraordinary. That hit me right in the gut. And I was when I saw it for the second time, I was very conscious of the way that you cut that. Could you talk us through what you were doing and how challenging that was to get that right?
Yeah. So that was actually very important, that little sequence, because he runs to the pub. And so we had a little bit more dialogue at the pub door with that man who's asking him, where do you want to go? And we found by reducing that and just allowing him run, because once he opens the door to the policeman, an audience may feel, oh, this is not good. Any policeman coming to your door is not good. So we had to keep that tension as he ran down. And then once we shortened that man as he sort of saying, oh, you're looking for your father, just to get in. And then we went to the slow motion shots. So Ken had shot a lot of this in 60 frames per second. And it felt really important to actually keep that. Sometimes in the film, when Ken shot at 60 frames per second, we had put a time warp on it and we had actually manipulated the time a little bit more. But in this instance, it actually felt really good and right I think I put a bit of a time warp on Jude to go from 24 to 60. And then Jamie Dornan, he's completely in slow motion. So you can just see every nuance on his face, and we removed the sound. So it's just that music playing. So it was sort of a very visceral cut, even though there's not that much shots. It's just the way we sort of brought it in, and then we just hold. And you hold on the child, and you as an audience are watching it thinking, this is not good. And then you see Pa, and as you said, Jamie Dornan is exquisite, and he did everything from sort of the surprise of what's my son doing here to the realization, Pop's dead. And then we cut to the high angle of the coffin just to make sure, because we had different sort of construction of shots around there, and we just found we used to go to the mourners first, but there was a little bit of a delay and people didn't quite know what had happened. They didn't know whether it was the taxman or whatever. So it was really important to just go to that one very simple high angle, and then the mourners and Granny upset, and then back in for the conversation around the chips of the importance of Pops and what he did for the little boy. So yeah, it was very important. But I think, again, I always like to use sound and music sort of as another character in the film. And I think Ken and we sort of share those bones of really trying to explore how sound and music can enhance this experience. And Ken always wanted Van Morrison top and tail. And then through the art of the fine cut, Van actually came in as our music. Our music is by Van. And then he supplied that instrumental. Had two instrumentals for us, which were roughly about 5 minutes each, and gave us the freedom that I could segue from one instrumental to another. And we used it here and we used it in 3 other places in the film. So that connective tissue allowed a sort of a simplicity and more lyricism in the sound design, which I think allowed memories to come in. I think when we veered against anything that might feel sentimental and just tried to keep it simple and clean, which I think hopefully allows an audience to bring their own feelings and emotions to the film when they experience it.
Absolutely. That is exactly what happened. And when Jamie Dornan's nominated for an Oscar, I hope they show that clip of him.
Can we get multiple nominations? Can we get Ciarán Hinds as well? Can we do this split cast?
Absolutely. No, this is going across the board. Or everybody, a nomination for you, a nomination for you.
Caitríona.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be. I think it's on the cards. Universe is the other. There's a great scene which I spoke to Caitríona about recently, and that was where Pa is thanking her for raising their sons. and it's a very still shot. It's a bit wider. It's like mid-range, and there's a lot going on between, when Caitríona looks at him and looks away. There's not really a hell of a lot of editing there, right? Like, why'd you make that choice not to go crazy with all different editing going back and forth?
Well, what's really interesting is in this film, I say, as an editor, my challenge for many scenes like this particular scene wasn't so much editing within, but it was actually keeping that purity of vision that actually Ken had. There were several scenes that he wanted in that painterly tableau framing, and he didn't do much coverage on, and that is one of them. So as an editor, one of my challenges was, if we had a lot of those scenes in a row, for example, there could be a risk of the film from a pace point of view, having sort of a similar plateau. So I think one of the things that we always tried to do was we were watching where we could move and shape. So that scene is as Ken shot it. He shot it in one shot. They performed it in one shot. It was a very long scene with a lot of dialogue. Caitríona is exquisite. So is Jamie, and so is the kid in the foreground.
Yeah.
And it's quite heartbreaking. And I think one of the things that that's a contribution that I had, because Ken lived this story, it's his family story, and he wrote this script. He was really gracious as a collaborator, and he was encouraging collaboration, I think, from all of us who've worked on this film, because he knew his vision. So therefore he was generous enough to listen to those of us who were working with him in case we had an idea that chimed with him. And one of the things, I actually have two small kids who live in Dublin with my husband, and I'm Pa. I commute to London all the time. I'm over in London at least 6 months of a year. Wow. So there was a scene which comes after the scene of Pa going back to England. And that scene, I don't know if you remember, he's in the street and he's waving to the child at the window. So that scene had come earlier in the script. But this scene that you're talking about was so exquisite. So the kid has just had a tantrum, has shouted, "I don't want to leave Belfast," which I'm sure has come straight out of Ken's actual experience, because it feels very authentic and truthful. Then we've that amazing scene between Jamie and Caitríona, and he is basically thanking her, and he's saying the words, "I don't know if we have until Easter. The boys may not have until Easter. You and I may not have until Easter," which is such a blow. So I can remember saying to Ken, "Do you think if we moved Pa going back to England from its earlier position here, do you think that could really be even more?" Because I was thinking myself, whenever I have to go to England and say there's been a little skirmish between the two kids and they've gone to bed with me giving out to them, and then I'm leaving at 4 a.m. and there's no time to rectify, and you're kissing them as they're sleeping. And Ken was wonderful, and Ken just said to me, "Yeah, let's audition that." And I put it there after that scene, which was, as I said, his vision. And then he immediately was like, "Yeah, thumbs up." And that freed up other areas above. So I think that also helped in that shaping, because for Pa to say, "I don't know if we have until Easter," was so heartbreaking. And then Caitríona just sits down on the couch and Will wakes up, but Buddy stays sleeping with all the chocolate on his mouth. And then we cut to the next morning, and Pa's leaving. And then so I moved it there, and then Ken said, "Let's try Carrickfergus." So we were like a very good team. We were having a dialogue and a collaboration as we were cutting. And then once we put Carrickfergus on, it was just like double thumbs up if you can do the double. But I think that type of shaping, thanks to the beautiful script and the incredible performances of the cast, it was a joy for me, because it was sort of like music, that we could make the film and we could edit the film with simplicity and authenticity, and just try and keep an eye on that and make sure that it felt truthful. If it felt truthful to us, hopefully it would feel truthful to an audience. And fingers crossed, so far, I think people are connecting with it on that level.
It's what a dream to be able to work with a director that you've worked with before. You have a shorthand, and you can kind of do this little dance and organically make the film together.
Yeah.
That's your job, right? Your job is not only for pace, for emotion, and obviously to propel the story, but if you're adding that extra element, you'll be taking this experience with you for a very long time.
You know what? Ken is just such a wonderful person to work with, and he's such a lovely, lovely, like I keep saying to him, he's like a master storyteller, or Van Morrison is a poet, known as a poet in Ireland. Well, Sir Kenneth Branagh, I'm calling him a poet too, because I think there's a lot of poetry in this film implicitly. It's not overt poetry, but it's there, and there's a musicality, I think, in the way that we've cut it, which is interesting and exciting.
It really is. You know, I really appreciate your insight. You've actually opened my eyes more, and I thought I knew everything. So
You're really sweet. Thank you, Rob. Well, look, thank you so much though for asking me to chat with you. I really appreciate it.